friends, it's Lauren. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new around here, I share about slow living, urban homesteading, and my experiences with motherhood. Today I wanted to share a little bit of the backstory of how we found our fixer-upper farmhouse on a couple of acres and why we ended up living this homesteading lifestyle, because it was not something that my husband or I grew up with, and it's not how we thought our life would go. Especially a couple years ago, we never would have imagined that this is what our life would look like on a daily basis. I probably would have laughed at you if you had told me. So before I get into it, if you can't, I don't know if you can tell from the screen or not, but I was pulling weeds this week. It's the middle of summer, the weeds are crazy, and I was not paying attention. I wasn't wearing gloves. Also, got a lot of flies. And I realized that I had gotten into some poison ivy or poison oak. I'm not really sure which one, but it spread from my arm to my legs to my torso to my neck to my ear, all over my face. It's even on my eyelid. Like, it is not comfortable, and I'm pretty splotchy and red at the moment. So I ended up going to the doctor today because it had been like 4 or 5 days and was just not getting better. So this is my little plug for wear your gardening gloves and pay attention to what poison ivy or poison oak or whatever, what they look like, because I didn't realize it until it was way too late. Let's start back at the beginning, not the beginning of time, but the beginning of my family, the Miller family. So my husband and I met in high school. I was a junior and he was a senior. We started dating right before my senior year of high school, and he had actually already gone to college. And so we started talking. We knew each other a little bit, but we ended up dating. And we both went to school in Arkansas, but I lived in Northwest Arkansas, and he went to a university in Central Arkansas. And so we dated long distance through college. It was really hard, but we made it. So thankfully we were only a couple of hours away. But so he moved up there. I'm trying to think. It was like I don't remember exactly, but I know that I had a year and a half of school left, and he had graduated before I had. And so he moved up to Northwest Arkansas, and I taught. Once I graduated, I taught first grade for 2 years before my son was born, and then I stayed home with him. So my husband works in IT, and he started at a job when he graduated and stayed there for several years. But at the beginning of 2020, I think it was maybe like, I want to say early March, if I remember correctly, maybe late February. It was right before COVID hit. And my husband got news that he was going to be a part of a big company layoff, and hundreds of people in his field lost their jobs. And he immediately started applying. Thankfully, they had severance and they had some time because his company was outsourcing, and so he started training the new people, which is kind of awkward, but we were really grateful that it wasn't an immediate layoff. And so he started applying for jobs, but it was highly competitive in Northwest Arkansas at the time because so many people in his field had gotten laid off, and a lot of them had a lot more experience. I think he had worked for 3-4 years. I can't remember exactly, but anyway, so he kept looking and applying, and the Lord was closing some doors. And so we started praying and said, God, if this is not working out, continue to close the doors and we will look elsewhere. And so he started applying all across the country, and I think he even considered applying overseas because he loves soccer, and we really like London, but our families would be really sad, and honestly we would too. So I don't know if he actually did that, but he did consider it. And he ended up, his aunt had a connection with a company in Kansas City, and he applied for it and got the job. And we found out that we were going to have to move. It was remote at the time, but they would have to eventually go back into the office. And so we put our house on the market. We had bought it, I think, a year or two before, and we had planned on being there for a long time. We really liked Arkansas. We were starting to feel settled there, and we had purchased our first home. And so we listed our house, and it was at a time when a lot of houses were selling pretty quickly and for quite a bit more than they would have sold for a year or two ago, or even a few months ago. And so it was a really good time to sell, and we listed it and were able to turn a pretty good profit pretty good profit because we had only bought it 2 years before, maybe less than that. But that meant we had to find a new place to live within 30 days. And so we started driving up to Kansas City. It was about a 4-hour drive from where we lived. And we were just like, it was crazy, like driving up on a weekday, trying to look at a house. And they were going for, I think we were looking at 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom homes, and they were going for like 40 to 50,000 over asking. People were foregoing inspections. They were offering cash, and we were not able to do that, and so we felt like we couldn't compete. I remember writing some like pretty sappy letters, which I don't know if that's good or bad. It didn't work for us, but we were like just trying everything we could think of to get a home. And so it wasn't working out. We considered renting, but it would have cost significantly more than our mortgage, and we had several pets, which would have upped the cost further. And we also we didn't want to be tied down to a lease. And then in case we found a house like the next month. And then we also we considered looking for houses that were smaller, but they were going for way over asking, and we didn't want to, in case we ended up moving from Kansas City in the future, didn't want to overpay for something. And so we had put in several offers, and I think somebody told us once, like, good job, you were the 7th closest offer, maybe next time. Like, it was just really discouraging. And I also want to be sensitive when I talk about this, because I know that just from hearing from different friends or family, like, yes, it was hard that my husband had lost his job, but we also had a lot of privilege in that, and that we had family that was able to help us if we needed a place to stay. We had he had severance, so we had some protection in place, and so I do want to be sensitive to that as well and recognize that that is not the case. So a lot of people went through things that were a lot more difficult during that time. But it was scary with having I think our son was a couple months old at the time, not knowing where we were going to be. My parents were really gracious, and they lived a couple of hours from Kansas City, and they offered to let us stay with them until we could find a place. And so we moved in with my parents, and I think our stuff was in a storage unit in Kansas City. And we would just continue to go look at houses. And it was kind of the same thing where nothing was working out. We did this for a couple of months, and then I think one day I was just like really thinking about how well, first of all, I had told Carson several months before that I never would ever move back to where I had grown up. I just didn't want to, for a variety of reasons. But it's funny how you can say one thing and then God will just, I don't know, I think sometimes He has very different plans than what we would have and for ourselves. And so we started liking the idea of being close to immediate family, and especially with having a young kid, it was really nice to have help and support. And so we ended up just for fun looking at some houses. I remember we looked at one house. It was this, I love historic homes, and it was this really beautiful historic home, but it was near the top of our budget, and it had a lot of things that were wrong with it that were going to cost a lot, and we weren't even sure if they were fixable. It also didn't really have a yard, which with kids, that was something that was important to us. And so we didn't put an offer in on that one. And I think we were talking about all these crazy ideas. Like one night I told my husband, I was like, maybe we should get an RV and we can travel. And so I don't hate traveling, but I don't love the traveling to get there process. And so he was like, I don't think you're gonna like that, but we considered it. And then we I think one night I was like, wouldn't it be fun if we found a couple of acres, like, but close to the city, and there were several different, like, random things that I had mentioned. And then the next day, I was looking, or maybe it was a couple days later, I don't really remember. I was up looking at Zillow late at night. Carson had already gone to bed, and this home, I think I had just been putting like 3 bedrooms, 2 bath in on Zillow, but then I was like, well, just see what's out there. So I think I took all of the contingencies away, and I scrolled, and then this house came up. I don't even know why I clicked on it, but the pictures were not good. It was taken on like a phone. They were blurry. They were crooked. They like didn't even show half of the house. It said that the home was a complete fixer-upper and needed to be gutted. But 1, it was below our budget, and 2, it was on 2.5 acres. And the next door neighbor also had a few acres and had a horse. And so I was like, I went and like woke my husband up, and I was like, guess what I found? And let's go see it tomorrow. But we couldn't live in the city because we had to move to Kansas City. And so we went the next morning with the listing agent and walked through the house. We walked through the house, and like I mentioned, the floors were coming up. I think the bathroom didn't work. There was like it looked like they had started to paint but never finished it, and so the door frames had like a very light coat of white paint. There was a pink bedroom that you could see the paint coming through. There were rat teeth marks. That really freaked me out and almost scared me away on the door. It was pretty bad, and so we like it wasn't move-in ready. It wouldn't even be livable because there was not a working bathroom, and the yard was completely overgrown. Like it was really not in good condition. And so, but then I was coming up with all of these ideas. I've always loved the idea of renovating a house and making it our own and trying to do it on a budget. And I was like coming up with so many ideas about how we could restore the home to maybe what it would have, not what it looked like 100 years ago, but more of a style that would fit with the home. I started seeing wallpaper and beadboard and clawfoot tub, and all of these ideas kept flooding in. But then we walked outside and we both just fell in love with it. I was really surprised because I thought there's no way he's going to be interested at all in this house, but he loved the yard, and we started talking about getting backyard chickens and a garden to grow our food, maybe some goats someday, putting soccer goals for our kids, or building a fire pit. We just had so many ideas, and something that our family really values is hospitality and creating a culture and environment in our home that feels safe and welcoming and warm. And we just envision this as being a place to do that for our own family, and then for other people as well. And so we talked, and we're like, okay, let's put in a lower offer than asking, which was crazy at the time because so many people were offering so much more than asking. And we decided to do a pretty big ask that we thought there's no way they'll even consider it. So our realtor was a family friend, the one in Kansas City, and she had done a lot for us and had shown us so many houses and taken so much time out of her schedule that we really wanted her to be able to benefit if we bought a house, but that wouldn't be any benefit. It would be a loss to the selling agent. And so we asked if there was any way that if they accepted our offer that our agent would be able to walk through the process with us. They called us back within an hour, I believe. I'll have to double check, I can't remember too. They called us back within an hour and said that the house was ours. They said that the family who had bought it had dreams of fixing it up and making it their home, but then they had some setbacks and had to move and rented it out to somebody who didn't care for it, or was not able to care for it. And so they said that they heard our story and wanted us to be the owners. And so they also said that the listing agent agreed to work with our realtor and was just very, very gracious about it. And we could just see the Lord's hand in this, that this is where He wanted us to be, and it started to make sense why all of these doors had been closing for so long. I mean, it had been a long a lot of months of hearing no and not knowing what our life was going to look like. And so we decided, okay, we'll put in the offer. Carson talked to his boss the next day, and he got permission to come up. Right at the time, they were still remote, but he said once we have to go in, we will work it out where you can come up once every other week for a day, and that will be enough. Which was crazy too. He agreed to that, and then we decided to get a lot of inspections done prior to closing on the home, because we wanted to make sure that we were able to afford the renovations that needed to happen to make it livable. And so we met with several people, plumbers, contractors, electricians, to get an idea of what it would cost to restore the place. And so we used the money, like I had mentioned, our home in Arkansas had sold for significantly more than we had bought it for 2 years prior, and so and this house was significantly below what we were for similar houses, what we were looking at in Kansas City. And so we ended up using the money from from the sale of our home in Arkansas to fix it up. So we didn't have to add that into our mortgage or take out loans for it. And so I remember we met with our inspector, and he was almost discouraging us from taking the house, and was like, this is going to be a lot of work, there are a lot of things wrong with it. But we just continued to pray and felt that the Lord was leading us here, was leading us to stay in this part of Kansas. And so that is the story of how we found our house. Now, I also mentioned that I would be talking about how we got into homesteading. So when you live on 2.5 acres, there is a decent amount of yard work that comes with it. When we moved in, the grass was waist high, and so it was pretty bad. But I learned how to sew after my son was born, and because I liked expensive baby clothes, and it wasn't in our budget to buy them, and so I wanted to learn how to make them. And then I lost my train of thought. Oh, day, friends. And then after learning how to sew, I started to become interested in slow fashion and how people were treated that were making the clothes that I was buying, and just started to really, I think something that I've struggled with, and sometimes still do definitely from time to time, is being content and not just wanting more all the time. And so I think through sewing, I learned to really appreciate my clothes. I don't shop 100% slow fashion, but I drastically changed the way that I thought about clothing, and switched from going out and buying huge hauls of cheap clothes that didn't really fit me right or that I didn't love, to being incredibly intentional about the way that I think about clothing, and also looking for it secondhand or making it if I can. And so that's kind of a slow living, homesteading related practice. When we moved here, I wanted to learn how to garden. We got backyard chickens this year. And we are within city limits, so we're limited with how many animals we can have, but we are interested in getting maybe some goats in the future, and honeybees. But right now we don't have either of those. And so I've also been learning about preserving food this year, canning, dehydrating, fermenting, because when you grow your food from seed or starts and spend months for a stalk of broccoli, you want to make sure that you can use it and not let it go to waste. And so it's really changed the way that I think about food. Another thing that got me interested in pursuing slow living, well, there's so many things, but one of them was I got diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, and so I'm trying to reduce inflammation in my body and eat whole foods, and reduce my exposure to pesticides. And so organic food is incredibly expensive, but I'm able to grow organic food cheaper than I would be able to buy it at the store. There are more upfront costs, but over time it will be less expensive. And I don't eat all organic, but I'm really working on slowly making some of those changes. And then the last thing is, we when Carson and I sit down to talk about what we hope for our family, we desire to be really close as a family and to have very strong relationships within our family. We really value time together, and we value living a slow life and appreciating what the Lord has given us. And we truly believe that when you leave space in your schedule and slow down, it gives you opportunities to minister to other people, have people into your home, to be hospitable. And so those were all things that we really valued. But if there are times when I'm feeling discouraged, or like something is just too hard to think about, these are things that we value and that we want to be a part of our family culture. And when you have a homestead, you end up spending a lot of time with your family because you have to. But it's been so special this year getting to garden with my son. He's been learning right alongside of me. When my husband he didn't have hardly any tools when we moved here, and he has quite the collection of tools and has built a lot of things out of wood for our home and like for outside as well, and has just picked up so many skills, and those are things that our kids are starting to want to learn and try. And so it's just I think saying no to the constant hustle. I think saying no to trying to just have more and to appreciate what we have has been transformational for our family. And so we still have a ways to go. We have a lot of work to do on this house, a lot of dreams, but it's been such a blessing, and we are so grateful, and looking back can just see that the Lord's hand was in it. And I think he still has a lot of plans for our family, and I pray that he will use this to be a place that is welcoming and safe and encouraging for other people. I want to share this to encourage you. So if you are in a season with a lot of no's happening, it is really hard, and it can be discouraging when you don't know why things aren't working out. But being on the other side of that, I can tell you that God is good, and I believe that not always that things will work. More often than not, things don't work out how we want them to. But I do believe that God is good, and I also want to encourage you that if you're feeling this pull where you want to slow down, and to not just have convenience in the end process, but in the end goal, but if you really want to value the process and learn skills like sewing or growing your own food, or preserving food, or getting chickens, or just any of these slow living practices, I want to encourage you to start small, start where you are, and you can do it. And I hope that you will join our family as we continue to learn those skills. We're still pretty new on this. We have a lot to learn, but we are truly enjoying it. And so it's hard. It is hard, especially with young children. We have an almost 4-year-old and an almost 1-year-old, but we wouldn't trade it. And so if you are not subscribed to my channel, if you would subscribe, I will continue to share more about our house. I want to get into the, oh my goodness, that fly, go away. Oh goodness. I want to get into the renovation process, what that was like, to share experiences, what we learned, resources for you, and then I also want to share more about what daily life on an urban homestead looks like. And so flies are part of it. Unfortunately, no matter how hard I try to get rid of them, they just come back the next day. We also have a broken door that makes it hard to keep it closed. Anyway, thank you so much for joining, friends, and I will see you next time.